Hey guys, Tony Pike here with Ancient Wisdom Survival School. Today I'm going to talk to you about making turkey wingbone calls and hunting and calling wild turkeys. So what I have here in my hand is a call that I've made out of the 3 wing bones that you'll find in a turkey's wing. You'll have the large bone, which is like the humerus of your human arm, and then the 2 smaller bones like the radius and ulna, and basically you're just making a megaphone. So how we want to use this call, we're gonna I bite my lips a little bit with my teeth in the front, and then I do kind of a kissing motion right here at the corner of my mouth. And you can kind of muffle that to quieten it down and to also kind of mimic the turkey turning its head out in the woods, which that's how they sound when you're out in nature. This is a 3-section call. Some people, I find that this has a nice range of, say, 200 yards to 400 yards. It's a great locator call. I have had some problems with it when turkeys get inside of, 300, 200 yards. It seems like it's a little bit too loud, and some of them aren't as compelled to come in as what softer calling gives you. So you'll see a lot of guys that make the call with just the 2 bones, and it makes it's a good sound. It sounds just like the larger one, except it's a little bit quieter, slightly different pitch. If you're a primitive hunter like I am, I love hunting with my homemade Osage bow and stone points. I take one of these with me every time I go. I've called in turkeys. I've called in and killed coyotes, predators. A lot of people don't know this about the wingbone call, but you can mimic a distress call. And forgive me if I don't nail it. I'm not the best caller, especially when I have an audience. But yeah, so you can do a animal distress call. And that'll bring the coyote in on a dime. I mean, it's a great little, a way to utilize some of your resources when you're done with your turkey hunt. Another way to utilize the wing is, and you guys may be familiar with the old fly down call that used to be pretty common back in the 80s. But if you go set up before the sun comes up, and you, right at about the time when turkeys are starting to fly down out of the roost, if you mimic the sound of a bird flying down, followed by some soft calling, it's likely that you can get one into your area. Now you'll want to have some sort of a good ground blind set up, or maybe down in a ditch or a creek that allows your silhouette to be hidden, or maybe behind a brush pile or in a treetop or behind a big tree. So what you want to do, I save my feathers for fletchings, for atlatls and arrows and whatnot. So I run the feathers at the base right through the bandsaw to cut those off. And what I'm left with is, I normally do about 5 or 6 at a time in a big stainless steel pot. But what's left of the wings, I just throw it in there with the little short feathers and the meat and everything still. I throw it in the pot and I boil it for maybe 2 or 3 hours. That'll soften up the meat and allow it to come off easier. Once I get all the meat off, you'll notice that the bones are still kind of greasy. So I can typically let them dry out for a day or 2. And then after they've dried out, I'll finish cleaning, and sometimes I'll sand the whole outer surface. The most important part of making this call, in my opinion, is knowing how to do this bone right here. For you to be able to make that sound, you don't want to have a big round piece of bone in your mouth. You want to have a very flat and narrow piece. And you can see on this one, you can see how it's oblong. It's almost oval shaped. So you want to search for that section of the bone. It'll be on this See how it gets wider here and it's flat that way to where this end is round. You'll want to cut it as far up on this end as you possibly can. Now the natives would use a stone knife such as this one or a flake, and you know, would score that. Typically I just use a bandsaw or a hacksaw, works just fine. There will be just a little bit of bone fragments and stuff if you get on the very far end of that you'll have to use an itty bitty drill bit to clean out. I don't take the whole section. It seems like there's a happy medium in there. The calls have a good, hearty, rich sound when you leave some length. And when you shorten them, they tend to have more of a, it's a little harsh and maybe, I don't know, to me it just doesn't sound as good. So what I'm looking for on this first bone is a section about that long. So you can see it's maybe 60% of that bone. And I'm also going to look at the outside diameter of the bone. Some of these bones will be more triangular, and then others are more circular. So the middle section, which would be the next larger bone, you definitely see that on that one. This one's not cleaned up very well, so I just was kind of throwing together a quick video for you guys, but you kind of want to find the area in the middle here. You can see where it starts to expand here, and it'll even expand on the little end. So we want to come down to the spot right before it starts expanding on the little end, and then on the bigger end, I don't know if you can see it or not. You can see this little bit of a groove right here. Typically, I end up cutting those right at that area where that little groove begins. So that'll give me my middle section. You can see I pretty well nailed that one. And you see on the big end of that one, it's a little bit triangular, like what I was showing you. Also, you can notice, this is a perfect time to show you this. You see the marrow inside there? When I cut this bone, it had a lot of marrow in it, and I used a drill, and I used a piece of wire and an air compressor with a chuck and tried to blow all that out of there, but you can't hardly get it all out. So it kind of leaves it dingy and ugly, I think, anyway. But I'll touch on that here in just a second. So when you get that triangular section of the big part of the middle bone, you'll notice that when you cut the small end of the big bone, and again, you see the bone is expanding as it goes towards the large end, and then on the little end, it's also starting to expand again. So we want to cut it right where it's just barely starting to expand. Now, once these sections are cut, I'm going to want to sand the outer side and ensure that they fit together. Sometimes I even have to take a Dremel tool and just barely open up the inside. If you're not sure, cut your bones longer to begin with, and then you can always shorten them to make them fit. You'll see what I'm talking about when you get into it. When you cut the big end of the big bone, you'll see that there's some almost like spider web shape of bone in there. And again, this one is cut at that same, if you can see it, but there's a little bit of a divot right in there. I try to cut just barely past that divot on this end. But yeah, you can take a Dremel tool, or if you have a knife or some other tool, drill, you can clean out that gunk that's in there that will just muffle your sound. Now, it would probably be okay to leave it in there if you're out in the field and you don't have a way to clean that out very easily. I've used them like that and they still sound okay, but I just like the cleaner look of one that's made this way. So when I put the three pieces together, if I didn't have any glue, I could just stick them together. I could pack mud in there, or I could just kind of use my fingers as an impromptu airtight seal so that I could call in turkeys and hunt, like for a survival situation. Or if you have evergreen trees around, if you have pine or spruce sap, you can heat up that sap and melt it, drip it into the joints there. That holds your call together. So this one's an all primitive model. That's pine pitch. The bone is not stained. I did use modern tools to make it. But what I like to do, I like to use these leather dyes from Phoebing's. It gives the calls a little darker appearance, like these. Now you can soak them in coffee or walnut dye or other natural vegetation-based dyes to darken them up. Blood would possibly do the same thing. But you probably don't want to go out there with a big white call. If you do, you definitely want to maybe try to tuck it into your shirt or try to keep it hidden, because, you know, as good as turkeys can see, you don't want to give them any opportunities whatsoever. So I just dip each one of these bone sections into the bottle, take the little brush and finish them up on any of the spots that I've missed, and let that dry. It takes about 24 hours for that to dry. And it seems like, I think that maybe that's an alcohol-based dye, which also seems like it helps to remove the grease from the bone, which helps the joints stay glued together. I haven't had any issues with the grease from the bone inhibiting the glue joint, but that could be a possibility if you try to rush the process. So take your time, you know, give it a few days. Don't try to jump in and just make these in a day. Typically when I'm doing them, I do 10 or 12 at a time, and I do them in phases so that then when I sit down to glue it, I can just glue them all up at once. Now what I like to use for the glue, I just use regular 2-part epoxy. Any of the 2-part epoxies will work. And I've got a little trick. I like to drop just a little bit of black paint into the epoxy, because I don't like the looks of modern glue on my primitive hunting gear, right? Don't look right. So if you like the primitive look, put a little bit of black paint in there. And then if you really want it to look nice and old-timey, if you grind up some charcoal dust and sprinkle it on the outside of the epoxy right before it sets up, it looks very similar to a heavily charcoal-based pine sap glue. Anyway, I hope you guys have found this video to be useful to you, and I wish you lots of luck. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so now. You can also find Ancient Wisdom Survival School on Facebook. That's where I'm most active, actually. Or if you want to send me a friend request on my personal account, Tony Pike, TonyPike. I have 2 of them. Love to hear from you. Love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear your stories. That would just make my day to find out that you guys went out and used this video to make your own call, and then, you know, went out in the woods and took a turkey with it. This is also a great project for you know, dads or moms. You're taking your kids, sons or daughters, hunting, and they get their first turkey. This is a great trophy, you know. Besides the spurs and the beards, this is something that has useful and practical application, and they can carry with them for years beyond that. And it'll help them to remember that memory of spending that wonderful time in the woods with you. So good luck, and God bless you all. Have a great day.